Hello and welcome. My name is George Pickering and I'm a member of IATEFL, the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. And it's my very great pleasure to deliver this talk about leading the Teacher Association team running productive meetings. Before I start the talk, I would like to say a very big thank you to the British Council Senegal for organising these seminars and for their long-term commitment to the development of teacher associations in the region. These seminars have been designed with the local teacher associations in mind, some of whom are at a mature stage of their development, many of whom are at an early developmental stage. I'm going to be talking about meetings because I think they are a particularly important way of ensuring that TAs function effectively. If you've had the same experience as me, you have taken part in some meetings which have worked effectively. You've also possibly taken part in meetings that have worked less effectively. In fact, someone said meetings are events at which we take minutes and waste hours. So let's start today by thinking briefly about what can go wrong with meetings. How can some meetings go wrong? And then let's think about how we can prevent those things from happening in our future meetings. So why can meetings go badly? Firstly, there's a lack of clear purpose as to why we're having a meeting. Secondly, there can be poor planning. Thirdly, there's poor control of the meeting. In other words, the meeting is not effectively chaired. Another thing is there could be poor communication before, during and after the meeting. Meetings can be joke-free zones. Meetings can be boring. And meetings, even when they're long meetings, can have unclear outcomes. At the end of the meeting, it's unclear what we have achieved and what we have decided. And in some meetings, a lot of time can be spent on what we call analysis paralysis, going round and round in circles over the same issues again and again without coming to any clear conclusions. So if there are some of the things that can go wrong with meetings, what can we do to prevent these things happening in our meetings? What I'm going to invite you to do is to answer three key questions. Firstly, what are the functions of meetings? In other words, why should we hold a meeting? Secondly, how can we run productive meetings? And thirdly, how can we avoid the problems identified already with some meetings? So what are the functions of meetings? Why do we hold meetings? I think it's worth remembering that we hold meetings for a number of different functions. For example, meetings can be an opportunity for information exchanges, where, for example, in a teacher association, people holding different functions, for example, the treasurer, for example, the events coordinator, exchange information reports about their particular functions. Meetings can also be the place where mini presentations are made. Meetings are, of course, essential in planning and also useful in terms of discussing and consulting a committee or a wider group of people. Meetings are obviously at the key of decision making for many teacher associations. There are also opportunities for team building when they work well, and there's sometimes the stage for negotiations. Most TAs don't have all the resources that they would like, and sometimes during meetings we need to negotiate between different parties the priorities for a teacher association over the next time period. So we've looked at the functions of meetings, and in fact within a particular meeting those functions might occur with different agenda items. So having looked at the functions of meetings, let's think about how we can run productive meetings. Let's think about what we can do before a meeting takes place, what we can do during the meeting, and what we need to do after the meeting. So for each of those particular time frames, here are some ideas that might help you to run productive meetings in the future. Before the meeting, make sure, of course, that a meeting is necessary. Meetings are time-consuming affairs. So the first question should always be, do we need a meeting or not? Or could we deal with this business in another way? The next point is plan meetings in advance. Think about the time and the place and the where, and always remember there is a virtual alternative these days for many people to a face-to-face meeting. In fact, the best advice I could give about planning a meeting in advance is to set the time and date of the next meeting at the end of the current meeting. The final point is send out agendas and make sure everyone knows who is going to speak about each item on the agenda. Now, there are different ways that you might write up your agenda. This is one way that I and others have found particularly useful. If you have a look at the screen, you will see that there is a place to describe what the meeting is, and there's at the top right-hand corner, there is not only the date and the start time, but there's also the finish time, as well as a place for the venue. There's a place for deciding who is going to be present at the meeting, and if you have a look for each agenda item, there is not just the name of the item, you will also see that there is a sponsor, that is to say, the initials of someone who will speak to that item. There is also an estimate of the amount of time each item will take. And finally, there's some idea whether or not for that particular item we are going to discuss it, whether or not we're going to decide something, or whether it's simply a question of giving information. And finally, as I suggested earlier, it's a good idea to have on the agenda an item on the date and time of the next meeting. So that would be an example of how you might write your agenda. So, what can you do during the meeting to make the meeting productive? The first question is really effective chairing. That is to say that the chairperson manages the meeting effectively. What does that chairperson have to do? Firstly, they need to ensure that the meeting starts on time. Imagine you are 10 people in a room, you're waiting for one person to arrive. They keep you waiting for 10 minutes. How much time have you wasted? You might say 10 minutes, but of course it's 100 minutes. It's 10 times 10. So I think it's important to establish the protocol that we start meetings on time. The next point is, if you are the chair, to thank everyone and encourage discussion. So at the beginning of the meeting, thank everybody for their time and their energy and their attention to the matter at hand. The next point, of course, the chair's role is keep to the agenda, to gently remind people that their comments should be related to a particular agenda item. The next point is to seek out people's opinions and to make sure that their views are clarified. So the role of the chair is to ask those questions like, are you saying that? Am I right in thinking that what you're proposing is? A key role of the chair is to prevent the overconfident from dominating, and that includes the chair themselves. In quite a few committees, the chair is the most important person on the committee. This can create problems, particularly if they express their opinions first, because other people seek to form their opinions around that has been conveyed by that person. When it comes to meetings and chairing meetings, I think it's useful to remember what Peter Drucker said about the effective executive. The effective executive is someone who listens first and speaks last. And that's good advice for an effective chair. Another point of the chair is to draw out the less confident, to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to express their point of view. The chair has an important role of summarising what has been agreed. So at the end of each agenda item, the chair needs to say, so what we have decided is GP to redraw the budget and present to the next meeting, which will take place in 4 weeks' time. And finally, and this is a difficult one, it is the role of the chair to make sure that the meeting ends on time. So, in relation to chairing, how good are you at chairing meetings? So just spend a moment to think. How good are you at planning meetings? How good are you at sending out timely agendas? Are you good at starting meeting on times? Are you able to encourage discussion? Do you keep participants to the agenda? Are you good at drawing out the less confident? And are you good at preventing people from dominating? Do you have the skills to summarise what has been agreed? And are you able to check commitment to decisions? Are you able to ask people if they are clear about what they have to do and whether or not they are motivated to do it? Are you good at ending the meeting on time? Are you good also at making sure that minutes are written up? And finally, are you good at making sure that decisions are implemented before the next meeting? So, moving away from the chair, let's look at the other people in the meeting. So what do they need to do to help the meeting be as productive as everybody wants it to be? Well, firstly, they need to arrive on time. We all have to commit ourselves to arriving at the start time of our meeting. We all need to be familiar with the agenda. We all need to read any papers in advance, and possibly based on that to think through the key issues that we're going to discuss at a meeting. We also need to try as far as possible to link our comments to those of other people, to express our agreement and build on their suggestions before putting our own ideas. We also need to remember to keep to the point, and we also need to remember to respond to points rather than personalities. There's a nice Arab proverb which says, listen to what is being said rather than who is saying it. So, how good are you at the moment at participating in meetings? How good are you at arriving on time? How good are you at making yourself familiar with the agenda? How good are you at reading papers in advance and thinking through the key issues in advance? How good are you at keeping to the point of particular agenda items? How good are you at responding to points rather than personalities? How good are you at responding and preparing for items that you will lead on during a meeting? And how good are you at linking your comments to previous ones when that is indeed appropriate? So, what needs to happen after a meeting to make sure that a particular meeting has been productive and the next meeting is also productive? We've mentioned this perhaps before, but it's absolutely crucial that minutes are written up for meetings, especially the action points, and that these are circulated as quickly as possible. It's also very helpful if the chair or somebody else follows up on action points between meetings to make sure that action points get done. So how can you improve the way you conduct your meetings? I've tried to give you some ideas of what you can do before, during and after meetings. I think it would be helpful to discuss with your committee or your committees the ways that you are going to conduct meetings and establish some clear protocols about how you are going to manage your meetings in the future. I think it's good if at an individual level we all review our own performance, perhaps against the points raised in this talk. I think it's also helpful to learn from others, and it's good to observe someone else who is good at contributing to meetings and to learn from them. I also think it's helpful if you invite a colleague to observe you chairing a meeting or participating in a meeting and give you specific feedback on your performance. And the last point which follows on from that is don't be afraid to ask for feedback at the end of your meetings. Do you think this has been a productive meeting? Have we achieved what we set out to achieve? What could we do differently next time? So, following on from that last point, we've spent a few minutes discussing how to run productive meetings in order to help your TA committee to be as effective as it can be. At the end of this brief talk, I wonder if you could think of some action points that you could take forward to make sure that your meetings are as effective as you want them to be and as effective as the rest of your committee want them to be. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. Good luck in all your future meetings.